Hey, they even hit record today. Wow. Marianne, I see you there. Peter is here live in concert. I'm not sure if I'm here. We'll figure that out soon enough. Soon enough, we'll have it figured out. All right, so this is week 15, and that means that only 2 more weeks, this week and next week, left in the semester. Yay. I'm sure you guys will be glad to be done with me and this class, but not before we finish up the assignments and the discussions. And I believe you guys have a paper you're working on. And I keep reminding you to make sure you use APA 7 for general formatting, which the problem is solved if you just use the template located on the writing and APA 7 page, located on the library's website. You also use APA 7 for in-text citations and your references, which are required. No plagiarism, please, and follow the instructions, because the rubric is based on the instructions. So not grade using the rubric. So if you follow the instructions, you'll be following the rubric, and you'll meet the requirements. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to review the entire course real quick in a nutshell. We're going to start with where we started at the beginning. We talked a little bit about leadership theory. While this class isn't truly about all the different theories of leadership, we did go into it a little bit. I do want to emphasize that leadership and management are not synonymous. While they should be, they're not. Managers tend to focus on the process and the outcome. Leadership keeps the process and outcome in mind, yet they seek to draw out the potential in each person. Leadership is not about control and power. Management is positional. Leadership is about working with others to accomplish the mission and vision. And while some leadership positions are technically a hybrid of leadership and management, sometimes an informal leader will arise and they're not in a position of authority over the group, but they become the leader of the group. That's an informal leader. Moving on, Lewin discussed 3 basic leadership styles. And while we didn't directly address them outside of lecture, so it's not in like your material or anything, I did present you with these so you would have an understanding of the terms. Autocratic, and this is where you give orders. It may cause fear to increase. Very useful in certain settings like the military and law enforcement. Democratic, here the leader strives to get the group to reach a consensus through discussions. Laissez-faire, this is the type of leadership that lets people run themselves. It's a hands-off approach. However, the goal is to accomplish the mission. Certain sectors of the business world function much better using laissez-faire leadership, like engineers. Anybody who's a creative, the more autonomy you give them, the better they're going to perform. There are some additional leadership styles that Lewin did not discuss, since he was the beginning of leadership theory. We have transactional, and this is an exchange system, a leadership style based on an exchange system in which the leader gives to the employees to gain. It shares similarities with McGregor's theory X and theory Y, motivational theories. If you remember, theory X is that the employees, the workers, don't want to perform, they don't want to work, and they're not motivated. While theory Y believes that people are motivated intrinsically to work and that they want to work. And so transactional just isn't the leader leading and guiding the employees so that they gain. There is typically a transaction that occurs. There's work in exchange for profit in the form of paychecks. So a lot of leadership is kind of a blend of different systems. Transactional leadership does rely a lot on the expectancy theory of motivation. Now, transformational leadership works to change a social system. It guides followers to become leaders. And then, of course, there's servant leadership, which was promoted originally by Robert Greenleaf back in the 80s, I believe it was. And this is where the leader sees himself as a servant to their team, their employees. This doesn't mean that when the employees want coffee, the leader goes and gets it for them. At occasion, it might include that. But this is the leader trying to do things for the betterment of the team. They put the team first. Okay, continuing a bit more on leadership, Clark did note that fear has no place in leadership. However, especially with authoritarian and the dictatorial styles of leadership, fear is often used. And there again, in certain settings like the military, it has its place. But typically, with most teams and civilian organizations, you don't want to operate with fear. Viganelli et al. Also pointed out that the behavior displayed by leaders can influence those who follow. Poor leadership behaviors can create distance within the system. And Viganelli et al. Also pointed out that this distance could be seen as perceived social or psychological distance and leader-follower physical distance. Leadership is really a lifestyle. It's about relationships. It's about that didactic relationship that the leader can have with each member on their team and with the team as a whole. Because remember, the team as a whole becomes an entity. So you have to have a relationship with that entity, that team. But it's comprised of numerous individuals who they themselves are entities. So you got the personal relationship, and then you have the relationship with the team. And a leader needs to keep that in order and keep it straight. Viganelli et al. Also presented transactional and transformational leadership as beneficial mixed leadership styles, and they found positive results. Now, transactional leadership, like I said, it isn't just about leading in order to gain. There's much more to it, and I believe we're going to go into that here in a minute. Viganelli et al. Also found that smaller teams displayed overall well-being, a better level of that well-being. However, they found that generally leaders who believe they are transformational leaders have employees who fail to see transformational leadership being applied. So if you think you're a transformational leader, talk to your team. See how they see you. Are you helping them? Do they feel like you're helping them to grow professionally and in their career? Or do they see it more as you're doing things just in order to gain for yourself? Convergence or divergence was found to be valuable in understanding the overall well-being of the staff, and this deals with sense making. Sense making is how we look at system members, how system members perceive and understand facts, events, and behaviors. So if we want to make sense of something, we look around us. We try to understand it. And a lot of times we do this, well, intrinsically, where we're trying to understand from our perspective. But if we open ourselves up to the perspective of other individuals on that team or in that system, we can increase the data we have access to, and it will help us in our sense making. Viganelli et al. Found that relationships between leaders and members are essential in understanding the beneficiality of leadership styles. Any leadership style should include a relationship between the leader and each of the members. Remember, we called that LMX, leader-member exchange. Now, systems thinkers seek to identify the nodes in the system or the elements in the system and how they relate together, their interconnection. Systems theory can be used to understand the most basic system, a friendship or acquaintanceship. And this goes all the way up to the most complex systems there are, multinational level organizations and even nations and entire continents, because a lot of the trade treaties are based upon continents and, of course, political systems. There are inputs and outputs, and interpersonal communication, training, and productivity conflicts and ethical considerations when we're looking at systems theory or system, we're applying systems thinking. So pay attention to the inputs into the system. Look at what that system does to process those inputs. Look at the outputs that they're sending out to their stakeholders, external stakeholders. Look at how people interconnect internally through internal interpersonal communication. Look at the training that's going on. Look at conflicts. You may have to engage in conflict resolution. And of course, you need to strive to be ethical at every stage. Now we're going to get more into psychological safety. Inclusion safety brings in individuals from a state of exclusion into that system. Learner safety allows people to learn without fear and rejection. Contributor safety, here the leader grants encouragement and support. The individual is then allowed to bring ideas to the team. Autonomy is given in a display of social exchange, and performance is returned. Clark pointed out that individuals must demonstrate competency to gain autonomy. We don't just give autonomy for no reason. We want to make sure that we're giving autonomy to people who have a track record of being high performers. So this autonomy really is earned. In challenger safety, the last stage, this is where innovation occurs. Ideas that counter or challenge the existing knowledge or system are encouraged in that safe environment. Threats and judgment will hold back or stifle the individual's curiosity. So as a leader, you want to bring your team through these 4 stages of psychological safety because you want that team as a whole and as individuals to be producing at high levels of proficiency. You want them to have autonomy. So let's look more specifically at inclusion safety again. Clark pointed out the need for respect and permission in inclusion safety. Now remember, respect and permission are factors at every single level of psychological safety. Here in inclusion safety, we're going to read a quote from Clark. By respect, Clark means the general level of regard and esteem we give to each other. To respect someone is to value and appreciate them. By permission, Clark means the permission given to help others to participate as members of a social unit, the degree to which we allow them to influence us and participate in what we are doing. So this respect and permission demonstrates the level given by the organization or the leader and the actions and behavior of each individual. When individuals are ignored, Clark says that they experience pain. And that leads to a world of problems, as we've found through the last number of weeks. Acceptance of each team member is essential if we want to develop inclusion safety for our team. Clark points out that being ignored is as painful as being rejected. So as a leader, you need to make sure you're not ignoring team members because that's the same thing as rejecting them. And it will lead to them engaging in self-censorship, them isolating themselves, and not contributing to the team. Clark noted that destructive or disruptive behavior results from not being accepted. Individuals begin to self-censor, like we said. They alter how much they contribute to the team or organization. Constructive dissent, which is very good, that's a positive type of dissent, is a byproduct of contributor safety. So that's the 3rd level of safety. And that constructive dissent is something that you as the leader are going to need to encourage. You may assign someone to that capacity, or you just might encourage it in general, but you want that constructive dissent. What you don't want is destructive dissent. And that right there will cause factions and fractions within the group, or fractures within the group. Still talking about inclusion safety, in considering respect, Clark says that being a member of the human race is sufficient. This is the worth, according to Clark, and it comes before worthiness. So if somebody is a human being, that gives them their value, their worth. Like I pointed out before, if we're assembling a team of doctors, obviously each person coming into that team is going to need to have their MD, their medical doctor. They are going to have that. That doesn't mean that people without that are not allowed to be human. They're just not going to be on that team because there are parameters that we set for teams. But among all the physicians that we bring to that team, the only criteria outside of being physicians is that they are human. Clark further points out that admission to the inclusion stage is not based on worthiness. So it doesn't matter on what you've done outside of that initial criteria of being human and meeting, okay, I'm a physician, I'm a plumber, whatever it is, that group that you're going into, you've got the basic criteria along with being human. Nothing else is needed. Now, permission at this stage is granting another individual permission to enter your sphere of influence. Clark pointed out, in this case, the innate human needs to learn and grow. Oh, we're talking about learner safety now, so we move to the second stage. In this case, the innate human needs to learn and grow, to engage in all aspects of the learning process without fear of being rejected or neglected. Remember, mistakes happen. And with learner safety, you're not going to be punishing the mistakes. Now, once again, we have to be practical and logical. If it is a group of physicians and the mistake leads to a patient suffering or dying, there is a consequence. We're not talking about that kind of mistake. We're talking about somebody who is in the process of learning something that is not going to cause harm to another human being. Clark noted that having no one care about your failure is the working definition of devastation in learner safety. So, if you have a professor that isn't concerned whether you pass or fail, that will be devastating to you. Clark discussed how most individuals initially fail by the teams they belong to before they failed themselves. So before I fail, in my eyes, I may be failing in the eyes of the team. Still on learner safety, it is nearly impossible to succeed when suffering at an emotional level. You have too much hurt. You have too much pain. Clark noted the unsafe workplace is most likely a refuge of ridicule. I used an example of the two teams in my military intelligence company back in the Army. There was my team where I was trying to make it a safe environment without even knowing all this from Clark. And the other team where there was rampant ridicule, cutting people down, and it was an all-out emotional battle. My team, I like to think it felt safer. My soldiers seemed to think it felt safer. They didn't like operating with the other team members because of all the hurt and ridicule that came from them. And they learned that from their leader. Clark mentions how rejection, humiliation, or punishment can often be abusive. And that's very true. If something's going to hurt somebody and you know it's going to hurt them, but you continue to engage in that behavior, you're being abusive to that individual. In an environment of fear, senior individuals often lead first, and then all you're left with are the poor performing individuals, and they stay because they don't have potential employers that they can go work for. But if you have a high track record and you're performing at an excellent level, yeah, you can move into a different company, a different organization. So if you have a lot of fear and rejection in your team, the good people are going to go. Who are you left with? Just the people that are poor performers. So that team is not going to be effective in meeting its mission or vision. It's not going to be effective in meeting the organizational mission or vision. So that's going to create another world of problems right there. So still on learner safety, there's some responsibilities as leaders. As leaders, we first create learner safety. Don't wait for your team members to create it. You can, as a team member, develop learner safety, but it's not going to be as effective. It's most effective when the leader first develops it. In learner safety, the implied duty is incumbent upon the learner to strive and learn. So the leader has got to create the environment that is learner safety. The individuals on the team must take it upon themselves to actually learn. Clark pointed out that this second stage requires you as the leader to be active in the process. You cannot be passive as a leader and get your team to actually function at a high level of proficiency at the learner safety stage. And permission at the learner safety stage is directed toward the individual's ability to engage in all aspects of the learning process. Edmondson pointed out that organizational learning can have its foundation in the shared organizational history. Now, remember, we talked about this shared organizational history. You don't keep the skeletons in the closet. You go ahead and put it out there, because those skeletons, the things the organization failed at or they didn't do right, can actually be the beginning of a story where you showed the organization making a change of direction and becoming good, becoming thoughtful, becoming ethical. So to solve this problem, Edmondson recommended that teams analyze their decision-making processes and look for areas to dissent against. That's that constructive dissent. So such areas that impact productivity. You want your team looking at how can we dissent in a constructive way on these areas. They're affecting productivity. How can we be more productive? How are we stuck in the status quo? How are we stuck in the past? Team cohesiveness, it is not the same thing as team safety. As a matter of fact, as Edmondson pointed out, this team cohesiveness can lead to groupthink. Now, I do believe a team needs cohesiveness, but you don't want it to become groupthink, because groupthink is not going to lead to creativity and innovation. Team safety relates directly to interpersonal trust. So Peter's in the classroom today. If I'm the leader and Peter is one of my team members, I want him to be able to trust me as the leader, and I need to trust him. That takes time to develop. Now, Jacob and Marianne are in the Zoom session here. They're also on the team. I want for Peter, Marianne, and Jacob each to trust each other as well. Edmondson found that psychological safety is directly related to learner safety. It is easy to think that this is just another stage in the process of psychological safety, and it is, but you're not going to achieve contributor safety or challenger safety unless you have inclusion safety first, then learner safety. Then you can build up from there. I see I have a question in the chat. You're okay, Jacob, don't worry. I'll mark you down in a minute for attendance. Now let's talk about contributor safety. Clark mentions that each person, due to being human, desires to participate in team activities. There are very few people that are true, real life, absolute, introverted lone wolves, meaning they can live in a cave for the rest of their life and they would be perfectly happy. Those people do exist, but it's very, 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 very rare. A person can be introverted and still have a longing to participate in a team. So now at the contributor stage, Clark pointed out that qualifying individuals must show performance to have earned a privilege. Does this person bring value to that team or organization? Do they add to the return on investment? Are they being productive? Are they using their knowledge and their skills and their experience in a way that the team or organization will benefit from? In essence, are they contributing? Clark provided a key concept here that pointed out that the preparation to perform creates the desire to perform. And so being in a class about leadership is that preparation to perform as a leader. I bet through the last 15 weeks, 14 weeks, you have begun to feel a hunger to be a leader. That's the natural progression. Now, failure to have this desire leads the team to stay stuck in the learner stage. Okay, the contributor stage, safety stage, this is where the full social contract is engaged in. Clark pointed out that organizations are active in two areas, execution and innovation. Execution is about economizing work and scaling process. Clark further noted that execution involves striving for efficiency. There's no variability here. Innovation is the opposite. It's about freedom, imagination, creativity, and the introduction of variability. There's a time and a place for execution. There's a time and a place for innovation. As a leader, you have to be able to know what time is what. If you've already gone through the creative process, the innovation has occurred. You now have a new product. Now you need to move into production. There's not as much innovation that's going to be necessary during the production stage of that item. So yes, the execution becomes more paramount. But if you're a smart leader, you will have people looking for ways to dissent creatively and constructively about the production process to find ways to become even more efficient. Clark broke innovation into two subcategories. You have offensive and defensive. The offensive subcategory is proactive, while the defensive subcategory is reactive. It's that knee-jerk reaction. Offensive innovation is a response to an opportunity, while defensive innovation is a response to a threat. When an external threat challenges the status quo, the natural fear of challenging the status quo is replaced with the survival instinct. And once again, in the life cycle of a team, there will be instances where the innovation will need to be offensive, and there will be instances where the innovation will need to be defensive. It's kind of like being a coach for a sports team. You have to know what plays to call at different times. You're not going to call a defensive play when you're in an offensive posture. So as a leader, you got to really keep track of what's going on. Now, here we're still on contributor safety. Think about the organization or team as possessing the same survival traits as we find in animals out in the wild. It's a product of the evolutionary process. We find that in the contributor stage, autonomy is exchanged for performance. You need to be performing. What does that look like in the contributor stage? You need to be coming up with ideas. You need to be bringing your perspective to the table. You need to be looking at ways that we can do things more efficiently. So the team leader offers autonomy and the team member returns performance. Clark pointed out that in the contributor stage of psychological safety, individuals must engage in increased levels of personal accountability. Your team should be more responsible by this point. Therefore, their accountability, their personal accountability to the team, to you as the leader, to the organization, should be increased. Competence and accountability show that the person is ready for contributor safety. Problems occur when a team member is given contributor safety before demonstrating this accountability and performance. Okay, so there are a couple types of contributor safety, according to Clark. You have formal immediate. This involves achieving a formal level of education or preparation. That's what you're doing now in class. You have formal gradual, which is when an individual is placed into a position and needs to develop the skills while in that position. Informal immediate includes no formal or specific qualifications to be met. This is usually due to an immediate need within the organization. And then you have, lastly, informal gradual. And this is when a person grows into that position. And Clark uses the examples of like a husband or a father. You can never be ready to be a father. Being a father, I know this. When you become a father, you are now a father for the first time, and you don't have a handbook. So you grow into that position. Let's talk more specifically about autonomy at the contributor safety stage. Clark discussed 3 levels of autonomy. You have task autonomy, which occurs when someone can only engage in a specific task. You limit their autonomy to this very specific task. Process autonomy happens when an individual demonstrates proficiency in a specific task and is granted more responsibility. Outcome autonomy is when an individual is expected to accomplish something without being led. They operate based on the expectation of task completion. Now, there are some human characteristics we have to talk about here in contributor safety. Motivation. The person wants to engage in the activity. They are motivated. Volition. The individual decides to act independently. Cognition. This is how individuals process information. Emotion. This is where a person's feelings reside. And remember that logic is rested in reason. I get that wrong. Logic is rested in emotion, and emotion is rested in logic. They're nested together. I know it sounds counterproductive, but that's the way it works in the human mind. The mind is what the brain does. The brain is the hardware, it's the computer. The software, that's the mind. There's apprehension. And this is the self-awareness or the consciousness leading to knowing their own emotions and ideas. As a leader, we need to be self-aware. As employees, we need to be self-aware. And knowing this, knowing our emotions and our ideas, can cause some apprehension to occur in the human mind. Clark discussed that there's the red and blue zones. The blue zone is where a person receives contributor safety. But the red zone, this is where the contributor safety is either reduced or not provided. And we did discuss more about that in detail, which you can turn back to that part of the book. You can look at the slides for that, but this is a review, so we're not going to go through every detail. There's the tell to ask ratio. Clark pointed out that when a leader tells more than they ask, team members can begin to act in a more passive mode. They can slow down their learning. This reverts the team into needing learner safety. If you don't maintain the stages before, so inclusion safety, learner safety, you're at contributor safety. If you're not going to maintain inclusion safety and learner safety, then it's going to degrade. You're not going to have contributor safety. The psychological safety will break down and you'll have to go back to 1 or 2 levels before and start rebuilding it again. Now, telling your team more than you listen is a trademark of authoritarian leadership. So, if you're not wanting to be an authoritarian leader, listen. Are you saying more than you're asking? Or are you listening to your people more than you're telling them something? There's a signal to noise ratio also. And this, as Clark pointed out, that the ask to tell ratio impacts the signal to noise ratio. The amount of signal compared to the amount of background noise. Background noise can literally be noise. It can be, so that's auditory distractions, visual distractions, mental distractions, process-related distractions. And when this noise, when this gets too low, the signal compared to the background noise, when it gets too low, team members refuse to listen anymore. So if you're noticing that your team members are not listening, see what the signal to noise ratio is. If you find that the team members, okay, we already said that. Signal to noise ratio, let's continue on that. Already said that. Okay, even well-meaning and kind leaders can fall in this trap. Okay, I as a leader, if I'm giving my people work and work and work and distractions and distractions and distractions and extra meetings and notes and communications that aren't related to the process at hand, then I am causing there to be a lot of noise. They're going to miss the signal. And I thought I fixed that error right there. It shouldn't have to be T to ask. It should be tell to ask. Apparently, I did not fix that one. I apologize. Clark noted that even over, as a leader, we can be in advocacy mode, and there's a time and a place for that. But if we're always in the advocacy mode, we can actually stop up our team members' ability to listen. We can plug their ears if we're always advocating for them. There again, there's a time and a place to be an advocate when you're a leader. But if you're doing it all the time, then your team isn't going to be able to think for themselves. They're not going to grow. Their performance will decline. Clark mentioned that the human mind is plastic. It restructures itself. This is very true. Neurons can restructure. So our teams, being made up of people with human minds in them, they can restructure themselves at a interpersonal level. That interconnection, think of that like neural synapses and neural links. You can actually get your team to have better interconnectedness. So you look at your team's learned patterns. What have they learned from you, the leader? Have they learned to reach out and network with people that are in a similar position, or to network with people in their team, on their team, within the organization? Or are they acting in a siloed manner? Clark pointed out that challenger safety democratizes innovation. It makes it available for everybody. Everybody has a say. They can bring something to the table. So we're getting ready to move into challenger safety. We've taken them through inclusion safety, through learner safety, into contributor safety, and we've grown to the point we're about ready to enter into challenger safety. But yet we still have a little bit more to go through here with contributor safety. We need to remove any cultural barriers or obstacles that our team members have to encounter. We got to get those obstacles removed if we want them to grow in the challenger safety. Teams must have internal connectivity to innovate. Not only does that mean, yes, they all have an email address through the organization, but they use it. They talk with each other. They take minutes and time out of their day and the points, and they say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm thinking, and they share. Clark noted that internal dissent, as long as it's constructive, will help the team to innovate. He also pointed out that creativity within the team can begin many times with the culture. What is your team's culture? Well, your team's culture is going to be very similar to that organizational culture that's encompassing the entire organization. But your team is going to be very specific in some of the nuanced aspects of it, because it's its own entity. It's a system within a system within a system. So determine what the culture of your team is. Clark discussed that it is easier to socialize a team from the start than to wait until later to socialize them. When I teach, when I start one of the freshman courses each year that I teach now, I don't wait until week 3 to start getting them to socialize. I start that in week 1 because it's easier to get them to cross the barriers and to start socializing and to begin networking at the very beginning. If I wait too long, they become entrenched in the way they do things. The same is true with other teams. Clark pointed out that organizational change is a process that moves through 3 separate layers. You have the technical layer, the behavioral layer, and the cultural layer. He also discussed that these 3 layers change at different speeds. So don't expect the technical layer to change at the same speed as the cultural. The structural layer, this includes non-human aspects like systems, processes, structures, roles, responsibilities, policies, procedures, and tools. These are known as artifacts. Now, the behavioral layer looks at how individuals behave in the team. And the cultural layer includes the individual's cultural influences and the internal organizational culture of the team and organization. So now you've got to consider, if your team is inclusive and diverse and equitable, you're going to have people in there of many different backgrounds. That adds to that cultural richness. You're going to have people of different religious traditions. It adds to the cultural vibrancy. You're going to have people from different generations, for different parts of the country. You're going to have men and women. You're going to have all the genders in there. You're going to have everybody, and that's going to add to that team culture. Clark pointed out that when the behavioral layer is changed, the structural layer is directly impacted. So if the artifacts are used to support the behavioral aspects and they are removed, the structure will fall apart. Behavior reverts to past patterns unless there are changes in the cultural layer. So if you want to make a sustainable, long-term change, you need to begin at the cultural layer. And then it goes into the behavioral layer, and then to the technical. Think back to when you experienced change that was only briefly maintained. Did the team change back to its old habits? If you're on a sports team and something new was added, it was exciting, but it wasn't maintained, it wasn't sustainable. Before long, you're operating on the old way of doing things again. We as human beings revert to the past so much. When we encounter uncertainty, we revert to the status quo, the past. When we encounter new changes, we have a tendency to want to cling to something that we already know. We as people don't typically like change, yet change brings life. There's a stream going through your backyard. You go out there, you can find tadpoles and little fishies, you find bugs, you find plants of all different species. But if you turn it into a pond and make that water stagnant, over time, the amount of life will reduce. So the same thing is true with teams. We need that cultural flow that little creek brings through the whole entire team. We need that. It's vibrant. It's life. Now we get into challenger safety. This is the stage that requires the greatest intersection of respect and permission. In the challenger stage, the issues can become political, meaning organizational or team level politics, stress-inducing and difficult. Individuals need to feel safe to make mistakes, just like during the learning stage. Clark pointed out that team members who are neurodivergent often face the greatest results of fear. They face fear at greater levels. Neurodivergent, that means they think in a different way from the most people. They're outliers. They're not bad. They're not wrong. They're just different. As a leader, I would love to have a team that has some neurodivergent individuals on it, because the perspectives are going to be that much more rich, that much more full. Clark discussed that innovation could be very upsetting to how that team accomplishes its tasks. Innovation could mean a whole new process has to be introduced into production. And that could upset everything. And that's okay, because we're at the challenger stage now. We want that upset in a healthy way. Clark pointed out that when a leader asks their team to innovate, they are asking them to risk failing, being criticized, and becoming vulnerable. Because if I ask for innovation and Peter and Jacob both bring me ideas, but Peter's is out of the box and Jacob's is well entrenched in the way we've done things for years, and Marianne, she's just kind of listening, seeing what's going on, Jacob is not taking a great risk. He's saying, hey, let's do it like we did it before. Peter's saying, let's try something new and different. He might be wrong. He might fail. He might be criticized by us, by the rest of the team. But that change, while it may not be the successful, innovative idea that we need, might be enough to get us thinking in a new way. And so we don't want people to feel criticized. We don't want them to think that they're going to be taking this risk of failure. They will be taking that, but we don't want them to have that. So we don't put that as a penalty when their idea falls through. What we do as leaders is we look for that one component. After their idea fell through, what's the one thing that remained that we can take and integrate into our final design? The final design is going to be made up of many different mistakes. Candor for cover means that you, as the leader, protect each person's right to speak candidly about any topic, provided they do not make personal attacks or have a malicious intent. As long as Jacob and Marianne and Peter and Xander and the rest of the crew in this class, if we're all on the team, as long as you each come to me and you're not having a bad bone in your ideas, you're not having malicious intent, you're not making personal attacks, you should be able to contribute and anything that you need to and challenge anything that you feel needs to be challenged, as long as it's not personal or in some way attacking somebody. So candor for cover. This is what primarily separates positive, constructive dissent from the destructive dissent. The leader needs to give this candor for cover. Candor for cover comes from the leader. Clark defined respect in this stage as being respect for the individual's ability to innovate. Clark pointed out that the ability to innovate is earned through how the individual performs. This ability to innovate is something that's been cultivated through inclusion safety stage, through the learner stage, through the contributor stage, and now even in the challenger stage, you're still cultivating that. The person must have earned the right to innovate. They earn that right by demonstrating their performance at every stage along the way through psychological safety. Clark noted that permission is given to the individual believing that they are acting with a pure motive to help improve things. So the leader needs to avoid being suspicious all the time. I'm not saying to just openly accept everything as a leader. We still have to test and try every idea. But as long as we know that that person is not being malicious, we don't need to take it as a personal attack. Clark pointed out that the leader can accept a person's challenge to the status quo based on their past performance, which means that some individuals may have their challenges considered more seriously than others. Using our class as an example, Jacob and I have been working together for 5 years. Peter is brand new on the team. He's been here for 6 months. He's gone through inclusion, learner, and contributor safety, and he's just getting into challenger safety, so he's able to bring challenges. Jacob, I've been working with Jacob for 5 years. Jacob has a proven track record. They both bring an idea to me. I'm probably going to give more time looking at Jacob's idea than Peter's, because Peter has yet to spend the time proving that he can bring good ideas. However, I, as the leader, should and must pay attention to leaders' challenges, his ideas, his perspectives, and I need to allow him to build up that currency. And you never know, maybe his idea is best this time. So, when trying to challenge a status quo without psychological safety, you can see negative results. Okay. You have to seek out differences and reduce ridicule. Differences are good. Every time I have that come up in my class, I point out everyone has a different perspective. We all have different worldviews. Even if we fall under the same umbrella of a worldview, we have our own nuanced personal applications or views. And that's great. We want these differences. And we want people to feel free that they can be in an environment where they're not being ridiculed. This is how you generate innovation from your team. Clark put it another way. Innovation is the process of connecting people, connecting things. Clark pointed out that leaders should not strive to attain the team's compliance or their consensus. There is a time and a place for consensus, but in most instances, as a leader, you've got to realize consensus may be beneficial at this moment, but if you go that route, you increase the likelihood of groupthink, of an echo chamber developing. So instead of trying to get consensus, we want diversity. Diversity in composition can lead to diversity of thought. Now, if everybody on the team has got a different way of thinking and they are using their own perspective from a standpoint of diversity, we can get a plethora of new ideas. We can identify a multitude of the factors impacting that situation. We can get better in our decision-making process. Leaders are not just the ones who instill challenger safety. They also get to be active as a recipient. Clark calls this being a player coach. And he pointed out that leaders who seek personal gain or recognition destroy their team's ability to innovate, because now it becomes about me, the leader, as opposed to we, the team. Also, leaders who develop challenger safety only for themselves actually steal it from their team. I'm going to let that sink in. If you're developing challenger safety, but it's really only for yourself, your team's not going to benefit from it. There's an imbalance of power here. This can lead to self-censorship within the team. Clark noted that each person has some form of self-centeredness. And I just realized, Peter, I didn't put the slides up. I owe you, dude. I owe you big. I'll be posting them online. I should have emailed them to you. I was having to, okay, full disclosure, Peter's aware of this. I came in, the computer was not turned on. It would not turn on. I went out to my car, got my laptop. I got back in, the computer had decided to start up. So as you know, I usually either have typos, which I've had a couple, and I also usually have some sort of technical issue. We've come to realize this by now. So Peter, I apologize. I will get these to you. They'll be posted in the announcements. And I thank you for your patience. Clark did note that each person has some form of self-centeredness. We have an ego. And it's not bad that we have an ego. It's bad when that ego is imbalanced, when it is unbalanced and it pushes other people aside. Good leaders seek to reduce this as much as possible. As a leader, you need to find out the areas where your ego is the strongest and then work to make it so it is less pervasive. And that is the slides for this portion. We're going to stop there. Our next section is going to be a little bit longer. We'll do that on Wednesday. So I'm going to cut the class short today. You can work on your assignments and your projects, and I will get the slides uploaded, and apologize to Peter again. I do want to appreciate each of you. You've been patient with me this semester as I have acclimated to teaching live in concert here on campus. And I look forward to seeing each of you get all your assignments turned in and thus grading them. So I'm going to let the class go unless you have any questions. Marianne or Jacob, do you have any questions or anything? Peter, in class, do you have any questions? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and let the class go, and I'll be posting the video up later today. Marianne, you have a question? All right, I'm gonna release the class now.